It begins with a voice, familiar, yet unlike any other. A voice that sounds both Western and Asian, crisp and melodic, switching effortlessly between accents, rhythms, and worlds. You might hear it answering a customer service call in Texas, teaching an online class in Seoul, or narrating a travel vlog from Manila. It's English, but not the English of London or New York. It's something uniquely its own. For decades, this voice has echoed quietly across the world, in call centers, classrooms, and global offices, without fanfare or recognition. Yet behind every syllable lies a revolution, a silent one, led not by soldiers or politicians, but by millions of Filipinos who turn a colonial legacy into a global advantage. Today, the Philippines stands at the crossroads of language, identity, and opportunity, redefining what it means to speak English in the modern world. But how did a small Southeast Asian nation become the training ground for the world's English workforce? And why is its influence only now being truly understood? What do you think? Could this be the world's most underrated linguistic success story? If stories like this fascinate you, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover more of the world's hidden connections. And tell us, where are you watching from? It began more than a century ago, when the sound of foreign tongue first echoed across tropical islands. In 1898, after over 300 years under Spanish rule, the Philippines was ceded to the United States. The new colonizers brought with them not just new governance, but a language that would reshape the nation's destiny. The Americans opened schools, trained teachers, and made English the language of progress. In classrooms of bamboo and tin roofs, Filipino children began reciting words that were once alien to them: apple, book, freedom. The language arrived not as poetry or art, but as a symbol of opportunity, a bridge to modernity. By the 1920s, thousands of young Filipinos were teaching English to their own people. They spoke it with clarity, precision, and a soft rhythm that reflected the musicality of their native tongues. What began as an instrument of control slowly evolved into a tool of empowerment. English became the passport to social mobility, the way to get a government job, to work abroad, to dream bigger than one's island. But this embrace of foreign language carried a quiet contradiction. In learning to speak like their colonizers, Filipinos also learned to navigate between worlds, between pride and practicality, identity and ambition. By the mid-20th century, English had become more than a subject. It was a social currency. Newspapers printed in English. Courts and government offices conducted business in it. On radio and television, polished English-speaking hosts became symbols of intelligence and status. Yet beneath this linguistic transformation was something deeper. The Philippines had become a nation of interpreters, bridging cultures not only with words, but with empathy. While many countries viewed English as an external force, something imposed or artificial, Filipinos made it their own. They softened its edges, infused it with warmth, and wove it to the cadences of Tagalog, Cebuano, and countless regional languages. This fusion birthed what linguists would later call Filipino English, distinct, rhythmic, and disarmingly human. When the world began to globalize in the late 20th century, this adaptability became a superpower. The same clarity and warmth that teachers once used in village classrooms now found new homes, in phone lines connecting Manila to New York, in lecture halls from Dubai to Tokyo, and in the digital corridors of the emerging internet age. But the true turning point was yet to come. A moment when the global economy would begin to listen closely to the Filipino voice and realize it was exactly what the world needed to hear. At the dawn of the 21st century, as multinational companies raced to cut costs and expand globally, a quiet revolution began to hum inside the high-rise buildings of Metro Manila and Cebu. Neon lights flickered through glass windows as young Filipinos, armed with headsets, neutral accents, and unshakable patience, began to speak to the world. This was the birth of the business process outsourcing industry, or BPO, a new frontier where communication became currency. From tech support to customer care, the Filipino voice became the unseen backbone of global business. Each night, millions stayed awake while the rest of the city slept, syncing their lives with time zones oceans away. What made them exceptional wasn't just their command of English. It was tone, empathy, rhythm, the ability to sound calm in chaos, cheerful in fatigue, human in a world increasingly automated. You can hear a smile through their voices, one American customer once said. And it was true. In a global economy built on efficiency, Filipinos reminded corporations that people still crave connection. They weren't just solving problems. They were softening distances. With every conversation, they were reshaping the world's idea of what English could sound like. Not cold and mechanical, but alive, warm, and deeply human. As the years passed, the call centers evolved into classrooms, studios, and digital platforms. English, once a colonial import, had become the country's greatest export. Filipino teachers began training students from Japan, South Korea, and China through glowing laptop screens, guiding millions in pronunciation, conversation, and confidence. From cramped apartments to quiet provincial homes, new voices joined the global conversation every day. The Filipino accent, once a marker difference, now became an emblem of trust. It carried a balance few others could replicate. Neutral enough for international communication, yet warm enough to feel human. Linguists began noticing something extraordinary. The Filipino variety of English was not merely an imitation of Western speech. It was becoming a standard of its own. Even outside classrooms and call centers, the sound carried. Filipino vloggers, narrators, and remote workers spread across digital platforms, their voices shaping global content in ways that felt familiar yet distinctly personal. The English spoken here was no longer about mimicry. It was about mastery, adaptability, and emotion. And so, the revolution deepened, not through noise or dominance, but through quiet presence, through voices that made strangers feel understood, through conversations that crossed oceans and returned home with pride. But as technology evolves again, with AI, automation, and synthetic speech, a new question rises. Will this uniquely human voice still matter in the world tomorrow? The world is entering an age where voices can be cloned, emotions can be simulated, and accents can be synthesized in seconds. Artificial intelligence is learning to sound human, but in that pursuit, something irreplaceable becomes clear. Machines can copy tone, but not sincerity. They can mimic warmth, but not empathy. This is where the Filipino voice stands apart. It's not just the words that matter, but the way they're delivered, the pauses that show patience, the laughter that feels genuine, the humility that softens misunderstanding. For decades, this authenticity has quietly defined the Philippines' global presence, long before emotional intelligence became a corporate buzzword. And now, as companies rethink what communication should sound like in the digital age, they are rediscovering something the world already knew. That connection is not a feature of language, but a feeling within it. The Filipino way of speaking has always carried that truth. English not as dominance, but as dialogue. Not as a borrowed tool, but as a shared bridge. Across generations, what began as a colonial inheritance has transformed into a human signature. One that reminds the world that technology may evolve, but empathy remains timeless. Listen closely, and you'll hear it everywhere. In classrooms that hum with curiosity, in call centers that never sleep, in the soft cadence of a YouTube storyteller reaching millions from a small room in Davao or Iloilo. The Filipino voice has become more than an accent. It's a sound that transcends distance, calm, melodic, and profoundly human. Perhaps that is the silent revolution's greatest triumph. Not the spread of English, but the transformation of what it means. In a world often divided by borders, hierarchy, and race, the Filipino voice quietly levels the field. It shows that fluency is not about sounding Western, but about being understood and understanding in return. Every sentence spoken by a Filipino worker, teacher, or creator adds to an invisible archive of connection, proof that language can unite without erasing identity. And as this revolution continues, it asks a simple, resonant question. What if the future global communication doesn't belong to the loudest voices, but to the kindest ones? The answer may already be echoing. In English, yes, but in a rhythm only the Philippines could have taught the world. In the end, this story isn't just about language. It's about legacy. A legacy written not in textbooks or treaties, but in the everyday voices that travel the world, unseen yet unmistakable. The silent revolution of Filipino English reminds us that progress doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers through call lines, classrooms, and conversations that connect strangers across oceans. And perhaps that's the quiet beauty of it all. that a voice born from history's turbulence has become a sound of calm in a restless world, a voice that doesn't conquer but connects,